This video is brought to you by Perrier. Perrier. Better water. No, really. I'm not sponsored by Perrier. This is just like an attempt at humor since one of the main comments and feedbacks I got from my friends is that my videos are not as entertaining enough as they should be. So that's my attempt at a joke. On with the book review, and this time I'm reviewing Shantaram. I don't really have much to say about my views on Shantaram other than I find this book to be very entertaining, very good, a very good, I want to say distraction, but that doesn't sound very positive. I would say it's a very good book to read if you want to be immersed into a world and like forget about your life. And on the other hand, it's a book that I wouldn't recommend if you want like a serious read or a very literary, tough, challenging read. Shantaram is a whopping 932 pages, but like every page just feels like takes a couple of seconds to finish because the author Gregory Roberts, his writing style is very very breezy and it's good writing in the sense that it's clear, straightforward writing. He kind of lets the story flow in his own way, and he gets to the point. He doesn't meander about this and that and the other. He doesn't really look like he's trying too hard to impress you with his writing, but he does try to cram in as many stories as he can into one book, and I feel that that could be, among other things, the main drawback of the book. So Shantaram is a story about an Australian fugitive called Lindsay. It's actually based on Gregory Roberts himself, who escaped from maximum security prison Australia to Bombay, India, so that he could be free for the time being. He was a bank robber. That's why he got arrested, and he robbed banks so that he could feed his heroin addiction. I don't really know why he was a heroin addict when he was in Australia, but I remember watching an interview online that he started taking drugs because he got really depressed when his wife left him. And that part is not really in the book, or I couldn't find that in any other place. He ends up in Bombay and ends up trying to find a second lease on life. Making a new fresh start under a new identity, with his fake New Zealand passport. And it's a very, very, very evocative book. The way it brings to life the characters and different, I don't know, like streets, corners, buildings, the geography of Bombay and for parts of India itself. I really feel like the key strength of the book is the way Roberts is able to portray not only people but the city. He It's just almost cinematic. I could picture the slums he wrote about. I could picture the hills, valleys of like this village he goes to at some point, and just a very vivid picture of a certain time and place in India. When it comes to the story, this is where things gets a bit slogging because like I said, like he tries to stuff in as many stories as he can, and what you get at the end is not really a long, coherent narrative as much as you get like a writer trying to juggle different story arcs together and hope they make sense at the end. I mean, there are some plot lines that do have a sense of continuity from beginning, middle, end all throughout the book, but there's like a lot of characters that just seem to pop in and go out and with no real purpose other than the fact that it was like a fun story to tell. Uh, and then when it comes to like other main characters in the book, one feels that they could have been drawn up better. One gets the impression that because this is not so literary book, that they were just like a one-dimensional character meant to be an outlet for the development of a main character, which is probably the only character that you could feel like has a personality in the book, and even at that, it feels a bit disappointing because Robert seems to try to vindicate his actions in the past, and trying to make a narrative makes him look like a good guy despite all the bad things that he's done in Australia and all the bad things he's actually done in the book, because in the book he ends up working for the Bombay Mafia. He seems to be trying to justify his actions in the book by making it look like he was a victim of his environment and his situation, which he was in a way, but we feel that like he does not, he's too easy on himself. He lets himself off the hook. I don't want to focus too much on the plot, but I think it's important to go over, let's say, the 3 to 4 main storylines in the book to give an idea of what kind of book this is, what kind of genre, let's say, it could fall into. I got the impression this was more of a travel book because it's about an Australian guy in India, and I had the impression he was traveling around, discovering the culture and meeting people and going on this adventure. And in a lot of ways that is the case, but for the most part, the book is mostly. It mostly takes place in Mumbai, and it is adventurous. It is exciting, but it is more about Lynn's or Roberts's personal journey of trying to find redemption for his past life. I would say this book is more of you could say like a fictional autobiography, almost like Eggers's heartbreaking work of staggering genius, but I guess I would say less literary. I do want to say that I did enjoy this book a lot for its plot, but I just felt a bit frustrated by I would by the fluff in the book. I once told a friend that the book would have been perfect even if it was not literary if it was cut down to roughly half of its size, and if it was edited in such a way where like only the main important storylines were there. Um, I felt there was even like passages where were not necessary. It just felt like he was writing for the sake of writing. I assume that he wrote like maybe thousands of pages. I mean, because it took him a long time to write. Um, this is his third draft actually. This book was a product. It was like the product of a third draft after the first 2 drafts he wrote in prison when he was jailed the third time were destroyed by prison guards. So I assume that he had a lot of things in his mind. The book took a long time for him to write. A long gestation period. He was 50 years old, around 50 years old when it was published. But I do feel that if you're going to write a book this ambitious and this personal, least you could do is try to find a way to tell the story in a way that is not necessarily just accessible to your audience, because this book is very accessible despite being this long, but that makes it just get to the point. Of course, I enjoyed the mini stories, the sub characters, like a lot of some funny moments. But I do feel it's better to be concise and short, short and sweet, or like 400-page book, but it's just like very well edited, very well written, then like drag it on for about 1,000 pages and have a lot of parts of the book drag on. Like that's one main criticism. Another main criticism I would say is the characters. The exception of maybe like Lynn himself, the narrator, I would say there's very few characters that have been written with a lot of depth, especially Prabhakar, this Indian guide who helps Lynn around Bombay, finding around best hotels, the best restaurants, the best places to get marijuana or hash from, and he is a very likable character, and he really is one of the heart of the he is in a way the heart of the book, because he's like carefree Indian, but at the same time he's a caricature. He's like the stereotype of like the lazy Indian, or the always optimistic Indian that has a very good smile and very talkative, exaggerates and everything. I love the character, and I like almost every scene with him, but like he seems not a very too convincing character. He seems very badly written, and not a lot of depth, and like it's as if like despite Lynn being very good friends, despite Gregory Roberts, let's say, basing this on a real person, I feel like he still looks at him from a point of view as a foreigner. Not really. I mean, what I mean to say is that I feel that like if Roberts had a real life friend based on Prabhakar, that Prabhakar was based on, then he should have been able to write Prabhakar's character with more complexity and depth. That's not the case in the book. And then it's not just that. There's Lynn's love interest, Carla, who thought was maybe one of the more interesting characters because there's a lot of air of mystery around her. She's one of the other foreigners that has been around in Bombay longer for Lynn, and very little is known about her till like halfway through the book or towards the end of the book. And it is a character that like I'm interested in because I want to see if like if a it's a I want to see if like they end up together or not, and then B, she seems to be a fairly well written character in the book, and she's not one of those. She seems to be a very good character, fairly interesting character because like she's a strong, independent woman that doesn't, that, makes her own way, doesn't let people tell her what to do. And I thought like, well, at least there's a strong female character in the book. But even then, I do get the impression that she could have been written a bit better. Uh, and then I don't want to go too much into it because I feel I'd spoil the book if I give any more details as to why I'm dissatisfied with how this character's been written. Um, doesn't mean that none of the characters are interesting. It's just that it feels like this is what makes the book so not literary. The motivations of all these characters, all these secondary main characters, seem pretty surface level. There's not then if there's any inner conflict or any motivation, it seems very it's spelled out so easily that like the reader doesn't feel like you can easily sympathize with them that much. It's there's not much. Feel like there's not much to invest in yourself as a reader into these characters because they just seem to be on this chessboard of a book and just move from A, B, and C, all at the whims of main character who just thinks of them as like being their friends or enemies or whatever. Um, there's another character I like in this book called Khadr by Khadir Khan, Abdul Khadir Khan, who is the head of one of the Bombay mafia. Is the head of one of the mafias. Um, this is a very interesting character in that he is not only a very feared man for being like the leader of one of the most dangerous and most powerful gangs in Bombay, but it's also the way he's depicting the book a very very kind, gentle, sophisticated man who is very not only does he like donate a lot of the money he makes from being a gangster to poor and to the Bombay community, and like anybody needs help. He he looks like he has a very noble cause being a mafioso. He's not just interested in making money. He actually has his own philosophy, which is expounded later in the book, and really becomes something of a father figure to Lynn. And I thought this was the character that I've invested a lot of my reading in the book, and I do think this is probably the most. Like, I think he is probably the most interesting character in the book. I did enjoy reading, like him more than like the main character himself. But I do feel that like it's not enough. Um, yeah, it feels like I'm not. This might be the worst book I've read that I'm reviewing on, but I still enjoy it. Um, I do think that I do think that the book does give give the reader a sense of perspective about how bad other people have it, especially when Lynn compares his life, no matter how good or bad it is in the book, to those of like people living in India at the lowest level. In the way he describes living conditions in not only slums but even prisons, it's just despicable. Um, there are some passages in the book I found very difficult to read. When he was in an Indian prison called Arthur Prison Road, how there's like even like a class system there, and the horrible living conditions there, and the things you had to do just to not die, and how badly the guards treat you there. It just disgusted me, and I know in a country like India, where there's like people look the other way, no one really cares about you for pure like poor if this kind of stuff happens, and there is a section in the book towards the end that focuses on Lynn's time in Afghanistan fighting Mujahideen. That's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, and one of the most difficult parts to read because it is very different from the other parts of the book. I mean, like the stakes are really high when Lynn reaches Afghanistan, um, because he's helping Khadr Bai Khan with the war effort for against the Soviets. Because Khan is Afghanistani and wants to help his country, be independent. And there's a lot of interesting stories in that section's interesting because like you learn more about Khadr Bai Khan and his past. And I think it's the first time I've really read a book that writes battle scenes or war scenes. I don't remember the last book I read that writes about war. I mean, so vividly. It is a bit jarring. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but like people do die, and it is very difficult to, I mean, to get through at some points. I put the book down a few times when like characters kept dying, but anyway, um, this is a very disorganized review. I've just spent too much time trying to outline the pros and cons. I do want to say that it did provide me. It has a high entertainment value. If whether you're a casual or a serious reader, it has a high entertainment value. But if you're a serious reader who just wants to economize your time to just books you think are only are worth reading twice or three times because we live in a very people don't have a lot of time to read these days. So I would not recommend this because it's long and like if you read halfway through and like you abandon it, you feel like you've wasted your time. So I'd only recommend this if you just want to light read or if you just want to enjoy yourself, have fun. It's not like a too dumb, toned down book, but it's not really literary. It's not like The Bard's Karamazov. It's not like To Kill a Mockingbird. There's supposed to be the sense that like the book is supposed to give you a sense of you know spiritual elevation or like make you feel understanding of Indian culture, which it does, but it is mostly superficial. I yeah, I'm not happy how I'm shitting on this book, but I think these are my true thoughts. I enjoyed the ride, but it is not as good as I expected it to be when I started reading it. Well, all right. So, okay, sorry for the disorganized review. This could have been better, and apologies for the bad lighting. I just want to get this review over with because I haven't reviewed in a while, and hopefully next time I'll probably review a book that I have much positive thoughts on. Thank you all. Keep reading.